Excuse me, Professor. Ren couldn't contain himself. But that's not entirely accurate about crystal processing. Silence fell like a slab. Even the Tiger Boy seemed to forget his hostility, too surprised by the Rotting Boy's audacity. Oh? Wei turned slowly and looked at him with evident annoyance. The student with the spore has something to contribute about cultivation. There was contained laughter. Mana crystals must be processed differently than broad cases like moonlight. They need to be more specific. For example, Luna's wolf crystals shouldn't just be at night, but on a night with 7 moons. Another example would be your manticore, which could have benefited from crystals processed under the first light of dawn. It would have reached Silver 3 instead of... Enough, Wei cut him off. I see we have another expert who thinks he knows more than generations of research. Young man, I studied for 30 years before cultivating this manticore. We reached Silver Rank 2 following methods proven by generations. To suggest that. Wei straightened, his golden patterns glowing with irritation. 5 points less for the student. What's your name? He asked. Ren Patinder, sir, Ren replied. More laughter, now open. Not that it matters much, Wei smiled maliciously. I doubt a spore will obtain many resources from the academy anyway. Enough, Wei cut him off again. I understand some students try to compensate for their limitations with extravagant theories, but in this class, we'll stick to proven methods. The texts have been proven by generations, Wei frowned. To suggest they're wrong based on what exactly? Readings in a story? Laughter filled the classroom. The Tiger Boy and his friends practically glowed with satisfaction. Luna, however, watched the scene with intense interest. Ren clenched his fists under his desk. Not only had he lost points he didn't even have yet, he could lose the opportunity to gain the support he so desperately needed. Reaching 100 points in this class by the end of the semester would now be a bit more difficult. I need a way to prove I'm right, he thought, while the mushrooms in his hair pulsed softly. Something irrefutable. Something not even Professor Wei can deny. The answer had to be somewhere, and he had to find it before his opportunity to obtain resources vanished completely. Ren sank in his seat. He hadn't expected wrong knowledge to be so deeply rooted. How could he prove he was right when everything they knew contradicted the truth? Let's continue. Wei returned to the board. As I was saying, basic cultivation follows simple rules. This was going to be harder than Ren thought. The rest of the class was torture. Every time Wei asked a question, he deliberately ignored Ren's raised hand. When he finally did call on him, it was only to say, "See, this is how you answer, with established facts, not absurd theories." As we can see in historical records, Wei continued, pointing to Taro. The digger beetle is a classic example of a beast with mediocre natural limits. None has surpassed bronze rank in the more than 500 years we have of species documentation. Ren saw how Taro's shoulders slumped. His roommate had a ton of books. He seemed to have been studying cultivation methods at home, hoping to find some exception. He had thought about telling him what he knew, but decided to wait until he knew him better. However, now Ren straightened in his seat. This was his opportunity. His classmate's beetle was perfect, a beast common enough that everyone knew its supposed limit, but with hidden potential that could manifest quickly with the correct method. If he could demonstrate visible results in a few months, he would have more than enough time to achieve it within the semester. Of course, he murmured to himself. First I'd have to convince the owner to try it. And that was the real challenge. Who would trust the boy with the useless spore? Who would risk their beast's cultivation following the Rotting Boy's advice? Still, did he have another choice? That's not true. Ren stood up. The digger beetle can reach Silver Rank 3 like any other beast. Laughter erupted. Wei looked at him as if he were a particularly annoying fly. First he questions established methods, and now he contradicts historical records. Another 5 points less, Mr. Patinder. The records you mention about beetle cultivation, Ren continued, ignoring the laughter, only have one error: the timing of processing. If we process the crystals following the correct specific method. More theories about strange specific timings? The exceptions to such ridiculous theories have never been successfully replicated. Wei smiled disdainfully. According to your expert opinion, what would happen if we follow the documented method but change only that detail? The beetle won't evolve into a greater excavator at bronze, as your texts say. It will become a living tunnel instead. Silence fell in the classroom. Taro looked at Ren with hope and confusion. A very specific prediction. Wei leaned forward. What if we put it to the test? If you're so sure, let's make a real bet. If you're right, I'll give you 1 bronze rank material, whatever you want, regardless of cost, and 100 points from my teaching unit in my 2 classes. To give you even more time for your wonderful demonstration, don't even bother coming anymore. Since you're so knowledgeable, you won't need my advice in class. You'll thus be able to pass the other classes more easily and obtain bronze 1 support instead of iron, assuming you pass the exams of all 5 units, of course. But if you're wrong, he smiled maliciously. If you don't demonstrate the exact beetle species you predicted, you lose all school support. Professor, Taro intervened. My beetle. It's your decision, of course, Wei continued. But I warn you, following Mr. Patinder's theories, if they stray too far from the common method, only guarantees your beast will end up at mature iron rank. Are you willing to risk your progress for the fantasies of someone who can't even evolve his own spore? Ren looked at Taro, seeing the conflict in his eyes. It was a lot to ask, risking his beast's future on the word of a roommate he barely knew. Don't worry, Taro. We'll follow exactly the documented method, changing only 1 specific moment of processing. It will be at night, as the professor's literature says. Taro thought for a moment, and then nodded. There was no turning back now. I accept the bet, Ren said firmly. If the beetle evolves into anything other than a living tunnel, you win. Wei studied Ren for a moment, as if evaluating whether the boy was really as foolish as he seemed. Deal. As they left the classroom, the Tiger Boys' group's laughter echoed through the hallway. Hey, rotting boy, one of them shouted. Are you practicing begging already? You'll need it when you lose your school support. Taro waited until they were gone before turning to Ren. Hey, he said quietly. I know you were trying to help, but I think this joke went too far. You should talk to Professor Wei and apologize. Maybe if you explain, you were just... It wasn't a joke, Ren interrupted, the mushrooms in his hair pulsing softly. I can help you have a better life, Taro. Your beetle has real potential. Look, I appreciate you trying to cheer me up, but my mother got me the books as soon as I invoked this thing. Taro shook his head. The records are clear. In 500 years, no digger beetle has surpassed bronze rank, and now, because of me, you could lose everything. We're only going to change 1 thing, Ren insisted. The rest will be exactly like the documented method. There's not as much risk for me as you think. I have an ace up my sleeve. There's no risk for you. Just play along, okay? Taro hesitated. He had already bought 100 crystals, and hadn't yet mixed them with the night essence, waiting to gather the 150 he would need for the complete method. Though I'm lucky it's not a full 180-day method, it's still expensive, he muttered, more to himself than to Ren. And getting 150 crystals is already quite expensive. Those extra 50 crystals will be hard to get within the school. The 100 you have will be more than enough, Ren smiled. We just need to wait for a specific night that's coming in a few days. Taro looked at Ren for a long moment. The mushrooms in his hair glowed with a steady light, as if reflecting the certainty in his words. You know what? Taro finally smiled. I hadn't started the mixture with the night essence anyway. I was waiting to have all the crystals to do it at once. He shrugged. I guess I won't lose anything by trying. If you're wrong, I'll still have time to get the other 50 crystals. After using 100 for 100 days, I'm sure I'll have the rest ready just in case. You won't need them, Ren smiled. I promise. As they walked to their next class, Ren couldn't help but notice how the mushrooms in his hair pulsed more strongly near certain walls. The ruins beneath the academy were calling, but that would have to wait. First, he had to prove that the rotting boy knew exactly what he was talking about.
Wait, that's not the end. You've just had a free taste. Now get the full story on the Pocket FM app, link in description. Check out our next video and playlist, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.